And welcome back to FHN. We are in the Bait Lab, presented to you by Max Lure. I'm Tommy Donlin. Tonight is a special topic. We are going to talk about halibut baits, okay? And it doesn't matter if you're fishing Mutiny Bay, if you're fishing the Eastern Strait, Nia Bay, or anywhere offshore or in between, okay? I'm going to cover everything from, what are the color schemes that we see, talk a little bit about UV and glow, and I'm going to walk you through the details about how to rig these baits because that's what matters most, okay? We're going to talk about weight. We're going to talk about spreader bars versus slider rigs, when to use which one, J hooks versus circle hooks, and we're going to talk also about how to rig a bait onto these rigs. Now, Dwayne let me off the hook this week. He's going to do the messy part next week and show you how to brine the bait, and then we'll have him take one of those baits and actually put it on the hooks. But we're going to talk through it tonight. I'm going to show you some tricks that I use to keep that bait on the hook, because let's face it, not everybody has an electric reel, and when you throw it down 600 feet, you want to make sure that that bait stays on your rig as long as possible. Okay, all right, let's go to the table here. We're going to look at some baits, and we're going to talk about the very specifics that make a successful halibut rig. All right, so what you're looking at is a couple different products out on the table. The first thing you'll notice is that I've got a 14-inch pearl white B2 squid. This is its little brother, the 9-inch pearl white B2 squid. Now these are UV reflective and pearl white. They aren't glow. If I'm fishing the coast, right, if I'm fishing out of La Push, Nia Bay, or Westport, my predominant lures are gonna be pearl white or glow. Okay, now it's okay to have some UV in the equation, but don't forget that out of those locations offshore, we're fishing pretty deep. Okay, so the UV rays are not going to penetrate quite that deep. Okay, let's take a look at the details in this rig. Now over here we have like a Yamashita hoochie or a P-line hoochie over here. And the key thing that you're going to notice right away is that I've got a float in here. Now what I did is I took a spinning glow and I ripped its wings off. I know it's a horrible thing to do, but I did it. Now you're also going to notice that the fat end of the spinning glow is at the top. Now the reason for that is when that spinning glow goes into the top of this hoochie, I want the maximum area contacting the hoochie. What I found early on in my halibut fishing career is that I would tear apart the top of the hoochie if I did it the other way around. Okay, now you're gonna have to apply a little bit of water, or spit, and kind of get that sucker up in there, but that's the way to go. The other thing you're gonna notice is I've got some beads. There's nothing special about the beads. It's a spacer, okay? Now if we look at this rig right here, the spacer is important because you'll notice that I've got my trail hook just outside the skirt of this squid hoochie right here, and I've got the lead hook not riding the very top of the skirt, but down a little bit. If you don't have these spacers in here, you're gonna scrunch up this squid at the top and it's not gonna look natural. So it's really important to make sure that you get the right spacing in here. So before you put your swivel on, you're gonna get the spacing correct and then attach the swivel. All right, the next thing you're gonna notice is this is heavy line, okay? Now, halibut are not line shy. You're looking at 250-pound big game as my go-to. I wouldn't go any less than 150-pound, okay? That's kind of my limit. In terms of the hooks, these are the hooks that you're looking at right here. They are Gamakatsu big river hooks, and they're awesome. The reason they're awesome is because they've got a really fine point, and they don't have a really big diameter, so they penetrate really easy, even with a lot of drag. One of the things that you have to remember when fishing halibut is you don't have to have a tight drag, okay? You should fish a reel that has a good 500 yards of line on the reel, minimum, okay? It's okay if that halibut takes a run. Let it run. A lot of times you don't realize it, but that halibut is gonna come onto your bait and just lay on your bait. And when you go on the upswing to jig up, you're gonna hook them in the side. Now we've caught some 75 to 85-pound halibut hooked in the side. Okay, if you tighten down the drag, you're just going to rip that hook straight out. So we actually don't fish that tight of a drag on halibut. Okay, that's the thing to remember. Now the other thing you're going to notice about these rigs is that I've got the barbs on every single one of these rigs. These rigs right here are for the ocean. Okay, for that opener that we just got, areas 5 through 10 that opened yesterday, you're going to want to go in and you're going to want to pinch all the barbs in order to be legal, okay? Don't forget to do that. I've got 2 sets of rigs. I've got kind of one for the straight, and I've got one set of rigs for the ocean. So that's another important factor there. In terms of length of leader, you don't really need it that long, 18 inches at most. Okay, let's take a look at the spreader bar part of the equation. I'm going to kind of scrunch these guys up and move them aside and bring the spreader bar in here. Now, the spreader bar is a great tool, okay? One of the things you're going to want to do is you're going to take your weight and you're going to attach it to the short end of the spreader bar. Now, I like to fish a lot of rocky areas for halibut. Why? Why is that? Because a lot of those larger halibut like to hang out where their food source is or just off of their food source, and that's near rocky structure. And so what you're going to do is you're going to use some monofilament and you're going to tie a loop with your monofilament onto this weight and then put it on the spreader bar. That way, if you get your spreader bar hung up, this weight will break away and you won't lose the rest of your rig. Okay, so that's just kind of an important thing to remember there. Now you're going to notice I've got everything from a 4-pound to a 3-pound to a 2-pound. And that's going to depend on if you are anchored up or if you are drifting and what that current is like and what the wind is like. Okay, if it's really windy and the current's pushing you, you're going to have to start bumping up your weights. Never had to use more than 4 pounds, and the majority of the time I'm using a 2-pound cod weight. Now, if you can, get the longest weight possible. Now, why would you do this? For a couple reasons. First, it's going to float your bait a little bit off the bottom, and you can also do that, you know, with a little bit bigger dropper. But the other thing is a longer weight has a less likelihood of getting stuck in the rocks. Super critical. Now, what I tell people, you know, in terms of, they ask me, you know, when do I fish a slider rig? Okay, and this is a slider rig, by the way. Let's take a look at this really quick before we talk about your decision gate in terms of which one you choose, spreader bar or slider rig. Slider rig is very cheap to make. It's very simple. You're looking at 200-pound, 250-pound tuna cord here, okay? And it's all it is a couple swivels on each end. One, you got a snap swivel or a corkscrew swivel, and then on the other end you just have a straight swivel. This goes to your main line, okay? This end here goes to your leader with your hoochie, and then you just attach your weight to the middle one. Now the key here is that when the halibut takes your leader, your hook, right, and your bait, the weight kind of slides back and forth. So the halibut doesn't feel the weight. It was the same concept that we were talking about with live bait lingcod fishing. You feel the bite, you give it line, the fish inhales your bait or inhales your rig, and then you apply the drag. The fish never feels the weight. Same concept. I like to use the slider rigs. Okay, this is talking about the decision gate. I like to use the slider rigs when there's a little bit of current. Okay, if there's a little bit of current, you know, your rig will kind of float in the water away from the rig. If there's no current at all and you drop down, what's going to happen is you're going to basically put a U in your line. Your rig will come up and contact your main line, and then you'll have a mess, which means you're going to be wishing, not fishing. Okay, remember that. All right, spreader bar is awesome. It's almost foolproof, and the way you rig it with your leader coming off the long end of the spreader bar, you're not going to get tangled. So if you start to get a slow drift, this is another great option. If you're using circle hooks, I'm not a circle hook guy, but if you are using circle hooks, I would go with a slider rig all day. Okay, that way you feel the bite, you give the fish line, let it eat it. Give it, you know, with bigger fish, bigger baits, it's not like a 2-second tuna count. You're going to give it a full 10 seconds, 15 seconds, maybe even a little bit more, and then engage the drag so that you're sure that circle hook seats in the corner of that fish's mouth. Okay. If you have a spreader bar rig, it's going to feel the weight. As soon as it takes the bait, it's going to feel the weight, and the weight is going to help rip that bait out of the fish's mouth. So keep that in mind. All right. Okay, you're in an area where, say, the dogfish are a big problem, okay, and you keep putting down a bait, it gets eaten by a dogfish. We've got a few areas. Swiftsure has been notorious for this in the past. There's a couple places in the strait where this can happen. It just depends on the year and how bad the dogfish are. Okay, look here. We've got a couple products. Power Bait, you know, I don't know how they pulled this off, but I will get a lot less dogfish if I'm running a power bait grub and no bait, as opposed to if I'm running a herring or shad or octopus or whatnot. So these things work really well. When we run double rigs for, say, you know, lingcod, when we're running a pipe jig and you know, a hook up top off of another line, we're going to use power bait or big hammer swim baits. And when you run those artificials, the dogfish just don't key on them. So we, you know, these are part of our arsenal. These right here, your big hammers, these are also part of the offshore arsenal. These are 9-inch. This color here is a glow bug, glows like crazy. So don't be afraid to mix it up with artificials if you're running into, you know, a dogfish problem, or if you're running into, say, a yellow eye problem. And by the way, speaking of yellow eye, one of the things that you're required to have on your boat, absolutely, is a descender device. Okay, now there's a couple different kinds. You've got the sequelizer, which is this guy right here. And there's two different types of sequelizers. There's one that is 100, 200, 300 foot, and one that is a shallower water. This one's the one that goes up to 300. You basically, when you rotate the end, when you twist the end, that sets the depth, okay? It'll pop out or screw in, and that controls where your setting is in terms of depth, okay? Then all you do when you catch that yellow eye that you can't keep, you're gonna take this, hook it in his jaw, and then I like to use a downrigger. So I'll take a downrigger, I'll get at least a 15-pound ball because there's some large yellow eye out there, and I'll hook him onto this is attached to the downrigger ball on the downrigger, and I'll take this guy and put it on his mouth, put him in the water, release that downrigger ball, and you know what? On my electronics, I've got a Raymarine Axiom Pro, I've got two of them, but on the back deck, I've got an Axiom Pro 12, and I can see that rockfish going down in the water column. I can see the point at which this sequelizer releases that rockfish, and I can watch that rockfish on my sonar swim down and away. So I know these things work, and I know those rockfish survive. So you got to have one anyway. You might as well get a good one. I think these are like 40 or 50 bucks. It's well worth the investment. You know, the fact is that we're able to have a lot of our offshore fisheries for those deep water lingcod because we're releasing them. If you let them float and they die, our seasons are going to get shut down. So don't skimp on a release device. Now, if you have to, I'm all about efficiency. Okay, I'm all about efficiency. The sequelizer is efficient. There's a Shelton descender device that works. Don't get me wrong. Some of those fish, those rockfish, are so big that you're still going to have to attach a downrigger ball. So if you put it on a rod, you're going to have a really good cardio workout reeling it back up. And I'm not saying you can't do it. You can. You just may be a little tired for a while. So this, you hook it upside down in the fish's mouth. You put the downrigger ball on it, and you send it down, and then you give it a good yank, and you slide it off the fish's mouth. Okay, these work. I think a lot of places give these away for free, or they're a couple bucks, but you know, you're going to get a workout. If you're into working out, no problem. But sequelizer is the way to go. All right, one of the other things we got to cover, this is critical. Sometimes you're fishing deep. You may be fishing 600 feet deep. I want to make sure that you guys know that stretchy thread is your friend. Okay, stretchy thread is your friend. So you're going to take your trout, and if you look here, I've got an imaginary trout. Maybe we'll use this. How about that? Okay, you're going to hook the trout or whatever bait you're using. You're going to take the hook, and you're going to put it through the bottom jaw of the trout, out the top in the middle of his head. You're going to take this back hook, and you're going to hook it in his back and out and bury the eye of the second hook in its back. And then you're going to take stretchy thread, and you're going to wrap the entire thing, okay? And then you're going to do 3 half hitches with the stretchy thread. And even when you get hit, when that halibut or lingcod hits your rig, you are still going to maintain that bait, which is super critical, okay? Bait's expensive, you know, and it's a deep drop. So you want to make it last. So stretchy thread is absolutely key. The other part that I want to mention is in the bigger B2 squid, we're using a float. Maybe the bobber dogger guys can tell me what this guy is, but this helps keep this big rig neutrally buoyant. So it doesn't sink, it doesn't float up. And that's where I want it. I want it right off the bottom. But it's critical to put this up in the head of the bait. All right, I think we've covered A to Z. That's a halibut rig right there, okay? Pearl white, UV, glow. Those are critical colors, and you can kind of play with it from there with purples and pinks, but make sure you have those key elements. You've got all of the tools of success. If you do not catch a halibut, reach out to us here at FHN. We will help you.